Busy you, in and out of doors every day. Think how much dust and dirt settle on your skin.
Read love stories, Miss Bates?
Well, occasionally.
Do you ever picture yourself in the situation the heroine finds herself in?
Yes, I do sometimes.
Then you have thought about yourself in the character of a wife.
Yes, I have, but in a very detached sort of way.
The homemaker walks miles every day, from sink to icebox, from cupboard to stove, and from kitchen to dining table.
Wonderful anniversary, dear, and thank you for the flowers.
You're welcome, darling. But if you could do one thing for me,
What?
try to do something about your coffee.
I hoped it would be better today.
The homemaker walks miles every day, from sink to icebox, from cupboard to stove, and from kitchen to dining table. Let's use some very special photography to compress the whole job of preparing a meal into a few seconds of time.
Charlie sees a lovely girl, a girl like yours or mine. Uses a whistle, a wink, and wild push gets her every time. Charlie sees a lovely girl, uses a whistle. Uses a whistle, uses a whistle, uses a whistle, it gets her every time.
The homemaker walks miles every day, from sink to icebox, from cupboard to stove, and from kitchen to dining room. The homemaker walks miles every day, from sink to icebox, from cupboard to stove, and from kitchen to dining room.
If I were running into you, I'd fire Rosie. I mean, I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say, Rosie, you're fired.
But all women have a little bitch in them. It's like a disease that... Charlie sees a lovely girl, a girl like yours, wanna help you look at the point, and wild her, gets her every time, gets her every time, gets her every time, gets her every time. Taking the women up.
Hi, I'm David Gauthier, and what you just saw was a video produced by local artist and educator Andrea Zampitella. We're lucky enough to have Andrea here in the studio with us today. So Andrea, tell us a little bit about your personal history.
I grew up in Winchester.
So have you been a lifelong resident? I didn't know.
Well, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, I lived in Boston for a little while. I lived in Malden, but I'm back here, and I've been here for about 5 years now.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you're a graduate of
I'm a graduate of Winchester High School.
And you're currently
And I'm
employed.
currently the library media specialist at Winchester High School.
What made you interested in being an art educator?
To be perfectly honest, I didn't always want to be an art educator. I wanted to be an artist first and foremost and live off of my art.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like my goal, but it's really hard to do that. It's hard to do that. So I joined the art ed department at Mass Art, and I didn't actually know that I wanted to be a teacher until I was in the classroom and saw the kind of impact that I could have. And that's really when I wanted to be a teacher. And I knew I needed to be a teacher, actually.
You mentioned your work in grad school, and you had a whole series of videos, and we're going to take a look at one right now. But there seemed to be a theme of frustration and confinement that I saw when I was watching them. Why don't we take a look at the first in that series, and if you could just introduce it real quick.
I met with a teacher mentor periodically throughout my grad school experience, and I came from like doing these giant collaborative art projects with lots of people, and then I was kind of alone in grad school, And I'm like, I don't really know what to do anymore because I'm used to doing big productions with lots of people. And then I was talking to her and I said, I just feel really frustrated because I feel like I'm just like blowing up a balloon, like balloons, and outside forces like popping them. Like I was talking about my experience teaching, and like occasionally one will get away. And it's like such a good feeling.
Right.
And so my teacher said, well, there's your art. That's what you need to do then. Just do that as a performance piece.
Well, let's take a look at that right now. Welcome back. What you saw was Balloon, an art piece by Andrea Zampitella, who's joining us in the studio here today. Andrea, the next one, now you sort of had a series based on your experiences, your early experiences in teaching.
After the balloon piece, my teacher encouraged me to do 100 videos about confinement.
Okay.
I was just in my garage with a whole pile of wood and didn't really know what to do, and decided to build a sculpture around myself that confines myself, just to see how far I could get without being trapped or without giving up.
I thought it was really interesting to see the opposites that you had there. It was the power of the drill, and then the helplessness that you were putting yourself in, you know what I mean? So it's like you were almost using your own power against you.
Yeah, and I think we do that. We build obstacles for ourselves. I think everybody does that. It makes things harder than they need to be sometimes. But I think I also kind of like that challenge of it being difficult and like struggling through that just to see how far I can get.
And you did it with a lot of different materials. You did it with some wood, you did it with some string, and there was one with sort of mixed media, which you called Nest.
Yeah.
And I'd like to actually take a look at that one right now. It seemed as though that one sort of grew out of some of the other ones, like you took a next step there. How did that one grow?
I think as it evolved, it was like, okay, now can we increase the production value? What if you had multiple cameras? What if you really couldn't get out of the situation you were in? So that one I was really trying to not be able to get out.
Well, let's take a look at Nest right now. Do you ever look back at your work and look at it differently than when you created it or when you looked at it for the first time?
Well, when I first created it, I didn't really know where I was going with it. I think it was like a breakthrough moment for me, and it led me down a path where all of a sudden ideas started flowing, which was really good at the time. I needed that. And now I look back and I get inspired by some of the things that I've done, actually. I want to keep doing more of them.
So what do you think about individual interpretation? So you as an artist, you're trying to convey something. And you may look at art one way, and I may interpret it completely differently. As an artist, do you find that okay if someone doesn't really get the message that you're trying to convey, but they get something from it?
Yeah, I think everybody brings their own experiences to a piece, and I think that's one of the things that makes art so powerful for people. So sometimes I don't even want to tell people what a piece is about, because I don't want that to influence how they view it.
Let's take a look at this next one. It's called Within and Without Bounds. Andrea, that's a really powerful piece. Talk to me about the experience from idea to actual execution of the piece.
So we started to talk about kind of the psychological ways that you can confine yourself. So I did a piece about, makeup, where I caked on lots of makeup to the point where it became kind of grotesque.
Yeah, I watched that one too. It was a little, it's unsettling.
Yeah.
And I think that's the word you used
And then
too.
I kind of did some research into the ways that women have been confined throughout history. And I was reading a lot about the Victorian era and corseted dresses. So it started with the dress. I made a corset dress out of scrap fabric, and then decided to kind of attach weights to the dress.
So added weight.
I added weight that I carry. And then I actually did that piece in like 7 different landscapes. But I settled on the beach as the final landscape, because I liked the way that the weights kind of drew a path on the sand, and that was kind of washed away by the tide.
What's that say to you?
I don't know. It's like you keep doing these things over and over again, and it's like, I don't know for what, but you keep going, even though I think it just ties in with the struggle.
Right. And often those things are self-inflicted too.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about the way you presented this one. There's a couple of different versions that you have of it, and the final one that you exhibited, I believe, was projected on 3 different walls. Now you've gone back to that theme of confinement, even in the actual presentation.
Yeah.
Was that intentional too?
That was intentional.
Okay. And where did you find that space?
Well, we all had the Backlar paint galleries at Mass Art for our thesis show. And so I immediately knew that I wanted one of the alcoves, one of those spaces.
Now, you actually took the video and you presented it in a completely opposite fashion on a billboard on Lansdowne Street in Boston, right? So tell me about the billboard project.
The mayor's office had a call for art to be projected on a billboard, so I submitted that piece, and
they chose it.
And they chose it, yeah.
So was it randomly playing at times of the night, or was there a schedule for it?
It was a little odd. We drove down to try to see it, and you had to stay for like an hour to actually see it, and then there was no sound, and it was quick. It was really cool to see it that massive.
Right.
Yeah.
So you went from this tiny alcove at Mass Art to this giant billboard. Does it change the statement at all?
It does. Because it's a beach, though, it's the ocean, I think it works in a certain way, like the expansiveness of it. But I'm not so sure that would be my venue of choice to show it, unless, I don't know. Yeah. It was kind of odd to see it there.
It sort of speaks to the personal element and then the universal element. That, it's your art, it's your statement, but this also might affect every one of us a little bit too. That's sort of what I was thinking, going down the 2 differences there.
That's usually my goal.
Good.
They're self-portraits, but I think they could be anybody's self-portrait, really.
The next piece we want to take a look at is entitled Fine China. Here it is. Talk to me about your inspiration for fine china.
I go to estate sales all the time, and I got this little teacup at an estate sale, and I had all my weights left over from Within and Without Bounds. So I started to just like stack them on top, and realized like this little teacup,
it was strong, right?
Yeah, it could hold a lot of weight. Like so much so that the first time I did that performance, I ran out of weights. And I was like, wow, you go.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to see how far that little teacup could stand. And you know what, the thing about that is that it did not break because of the weight. It was the positioning.
Right.
That made it slide out.
If it were just centered on top, you probably could have kept going.
I probably could have kept going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
love
it's
the way
pretty
it
amazing.
ended with the noise and the actual, the finality of it. Because you're sort of, it's building towards something. You know, you're literally building, but the tension is building as well throughout the video. You're just waiting
Well, it's
for
a
it
little
to-
scary actually, just sit there, just because the stack of weights kept getting, and I knew how much weight was actually
Right.
on there, and I was like, oh, it could hit like me, it could fall
Yeah.
on my foot or something.
Yeah. What made you decide to shoot it with 3 different cameras and then present them side by side like that? Because I thought it was an interesting visual choice.
Yeah, I think because there was tension in multiple places. So like the teacup had tension. I think my like foot had tension, and then just the overall shot of what was happening. So I think zooming in on that tension was where I was going with that.
I just liked that choice because in a traditional television sense, we cut back and forth between cameras, but you just decided to present all 3 at the same time. So, you know, the viewer decides, not the producer. I thought that was interesting. As a woman and an artist and a professional, how do you view how gender stacks up when it comes to art as a profession?
I don't have much experience, like, in terms of being treated differently.
Well, that's good.
Which is good,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you do sort of go down and explore some of those traditional roles, like we had off the top with Happy Homemaker.
I guess not so much in the art world. I haven't experienced it, but I have experienced it in just like day-to-day life.
Okay.
Like if I go to Home Depot and I'm looking for, like for instance, I had like a tiny bin, plastic bin at Home Depot, and the guy at the desk said, "Hey Joey, take that out for her." And I said, "No, it's okay, I can carry this." He said, "Nope, take it out for her." And it was like almost ridiculous,
Right.
because I was walking to my car with this guy holding this tiny little bin behind me.
Right.
Or like in Home Depot, I've experienced it a lot, just not being taken seriously. Like,
Let me help you with that,
let me
honey.
help, yeah. Or what do you need to use that for? And it's like,
Right.
well, I'm making a massive beehive. Okay. And it's like, well, why?
Right. I wonder sometimes, you know, I think, not to defend someone who's being, you know, sexist, but is there something that, you know, in a male point of view thinks that they're doing you a favor almost by saying, oh, we'll carry that for you, you know, and not realizing that it's actually offensive.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's just how people have grown up.
Yeah.
So it's hard to change that.
Right.
I think you got to start
Yeah.
teaching.
You know, I was always taught, right, you hold the door for the woman.
Right.
You walk on the street side of the sidewalk when you're walking with a woman. You know, there are certain things that you're supposed to do. And
Right,
then
right.
sometimes as a man, you're like, well, I don't want to, you know, insult a woman's, you know, sense of equality by doing some of those things. But you
Yeah,
know,
it's a weird.
It's an odd line, right?
it's
Between being a
it's an odd-
gentleman and being a sexist, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think there's a difference between being polite and feeling like you're underestimated. Like for me, it's like It's okay if you are being polite, you're holding the door for me. But if you say like, you can't go on that ladder, honey.
Right.
Then it's kind of a...
What do you
like,
need a
no,
power
I
drill
can't.
for?
Yeah, you can't use that power drill, you'll get hurt. Those kind of things really get to me.
So there's a whimsical side to your art too. And there was a piece that I discovered called Geodesic Dome. And you had talked about being drawn to visually interesting places. And I think this really illustrates that. Let's take a quick look at that. So you mentioned that this piece was more fun for you, but I thought there was a really interesting story in how the whole thing broke down. Where was that building? It was a crazy looking place.
A few of my friends and I found a geodesic dome on Airbnb in the middle of nowhere in Vermont.
So you decided you just had to be there? You
Yeah,
had to check
we
it
were
out?
like, we just wanted to check it out. So we followed our GPS up this hill that ended up being like class 5 or something, that non-permissible for vehicles to drive through. And we found that out later, but we made it about 75% up the hill, and then we got stuck completely in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service.
So
or anything.
You're just walking up
So
to
we're
this.
walking. We found someone that was actually building a cottage up there, and he was driving around on an ATV. So we went up and we told him, and he's like, "Oh, you don't want to be here. Why'd you go up here? This is a class 5 or class something road."
Yeah.
And we're like, "I don't know. Our GPS brought us here. We're trying to get to the dome." So when we were finally there, we were just like, we just need to do something fun.
What is it about a visually appealing space or a piece of architecture that draws you in and inspires you?
My house is in Winchester. It's all cedar. It's a contemporary, so it's very oddly designed. It has a greenhouse in the back. Like, there aren't many places like that in Winchester. And I think that's one of the things. It's like they're rare. Or there's a history to them that I think I'm drawn to, which is why I go to estate sales every weekend, just to look for treasures, for things.
Forgotten objects, you called them, right?
Yeah, forgotten objects, or like things that have a history to them.
But even though you don't know that history.
No, but it's so fun to find out what that history is for
Right.
me. Yeah.
You might not even know, who owned that object. You know, there could be
No, but sometimes I find out, and then I find out about that person. Yeah. So like I found a whole bunch of letters at an estate sale from the early 1900s, and they were all mixed up. And it was like I spent the whole day trying to piece together this person's like timeline of their life, and it was really cool. I actually accidentally bought a dead dog one time, though.
All right, you're going to need to expound on that one.
Yeah.
What
yeah, it
happened?
was my friend's mom really likes dachshund dogs, and in this estate sale they had a whole bunch of dachshund like knickknacks and stuff, and they had this really cool leather bottle that was shaped like a dachshund. And so, I mean, the way these sales work, you go in and it's kind of like a madhouse. Like everybody's kind of running around. So you have to just grab things and make a pile. And then at the end, they give you a price for everything. So if you want it, you take it. Otherwise, someone else will. So I just grabbed this bottle, put it in my pile, went home, didn't think about it. And later that night, I was going to my friend's party. And I was like, oh, I'll bring the bottle for her mom. So I get the bottle, and my other friend came over, and he's like, what is that anyways? And I'm like, I don't know, it's like a wine bottle or something. And he opens up the bottle and like pours it into his hand, and there's like dirt or like gravel or something. And we both looked at each other, and he's like, ooh, I'm getting dead dog vibes. And I was like, oh no, it's Sparky. So we brought it to the party anyways.
You bought Sparky's urn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There's a story in that one.
Yeah.
There's definitely some history there.
Yeah, it was a good party prop.
Yeah,
Everybody was taking pictures with it.
Of course, yeah. It must have been a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, and then my mom bought a set of dishes one time, and in between each of the dishes were $50 bills.
Really?
Yeah. So we found someone's hiding spot.
That's a pretty good deal.
So it's all these kinds of things that intrigue me about estate sales.
Sure.
You never know what you're going to find.
You're a treasure hunter.
Yeah.
And an artist. And an educator. If you were going to inspire anyone, not just the young person, but anyone who has artistic inclinations, what would you say first and foremost?
I think you got to start with your passions. You got to find, I think it's different for everybody, so it's like, it's hard to say what I would say because everybody has different experiences. And I think you got to meet them where they are. So, for instance, I had a student who really didn't like still life drawing, but he really liked comics. And the teacher wanted him to do a still life. So it was like, well, what if you use the proportions of the still life, but draw your comic book characters? Mm-hmm. So it's just one way to engage students in what they're interested in.
Where does an artist start? How do you get going? You know,
well, I mean, I think it's the same kind of thing. It's like, what are you dealing with? What are you experiencing at the moment, at that time? Like for me, it was really hard to get started in grad school because I had been doing very different work before grad school. So it started with the teaching. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just kind of, it started there, but it evolved to be more about like beauty and struggle and labor and, you know, self-inflicted struggle. I don't know. Like all.
But you have to take that step.
You have to take a step.
From being told this is your assignment to now creating it on your own, right? And how does an artist sort of get over that hump and say, this is how I want to express myself? It's that initial
Well, I think
part.
I have another story. I taught a student who really wasn't interested in art. And she would come in with her Coach bag every day. This is a high school class. And she would talk to her friend. And and didn't care about any of the assignments at all. The whole year, didn't pick up a pencil. And one of the assignments that I gave was about reflection. So I showed a bunch of artists who do work on reflective objects, reflections in water, and then also personal reflections. And for some reason, the personal part of that triggered something with her. And the next day she came in and she said, "Oh my God, Miss Z, I have the best idea." She's like, "My dad lives in California, it's almost his birthday, and I want to do a drawing of me looking in a mirror, and in the mirror is my dad, because I'm a reflection of my dad." And for the first time all year, she picked up a pencil and started drawing.
How'd the drawing come out?
It didn't matter. To me, it didn't matter.
Right.
To me, it really didn't matter because it wasn't about how technically skilled she was at drawing. It's like she picked up the pencil. We can always teach the techniques. It's the passion that we want. Otherwise, she'll never pick up the pencil. So I think it's really true for anybody that you're not going to do something unless you really feel passionate about it.
For someone who might be searching for inspiration, do you have any advice on where you might find it, or is that just different for everybody?
I think you can really find it anywhere. I could find inspiration in a flower or a chair. I could find it in emotions. It's really like how you...
Is that internal?
Partially, I think.
Yeah.
But I think you sometimes you just need to do. You need to make things, and then that inspiration will come later.
And one action leads to another
Yeah.
action and leads to inspiration, maybe.
Yeah. And I think it's you just don't want to be stagnant, because then you don't get anywhere. And once you take that first leap, then you can see the possibilities. Like if I didn't do that balloon piece, I don't know that this whole body of work would have ever even gone down that path.
Well, I think you're brave to put yourself in some of the positions that you do. You disagree, right? I mean, what is that?
Well, I think it's confidence, building that confidence. I had a teacher who came over to she was my mentor, Ellen Wetmore. She's a great artist. And she came over to my house one time. And we had been talking about doing live performance for a long time. And I was very afraid of live performance. I'm pretty shy. Like, even the interview, I'm like, it's not my thing. But she came over and she said, "Okay, so you're going to do a live performance tonight?" And I had not planned to do that at all. Tonight.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I have 2 hours, so go ahead."
Wow.
So I ended up like scrambling around my house, getting like all kinds of fabric and thread and anything I could find, and just tying myself to different objects in my kitchen. And so like all of a sudden the chair started moving towards me, and like I tied myself to the banister, and then the Christmas tree, and like all of these things started. But it was like taking that step or being forced to, and sometimes that like starts to build that confidence that you can do it.
Yeah.
And then the next piece I did was the weights, and I actually did that out in public space.
Right. So that's a big challenge to get over.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your art, and I'm
Thank
sure
you.
I'm really appreciate that you're willing to share that and inspire young people as well.
Thanks so much.
If folks are interested in seeing more of your work, where can they see it?
They can go to my website, andreazampitella.com.
That's great. And thanks so much for spending some time with us today. It was good to try to get to know you and get to know what inspires you, and hopefully this will be just another way to inspire more people.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
And thank all of you for watching. If you'd like more information on programming at WinCam, make sure to visit wincam.org.